Hello and welcome everybody. Today we continue working on the central attack and the Philidor defense. And after e4, e5, knight f3, d6. So black is playing the Philidor's defense, and we respond with the d2, d4 central attack. So last time we were working on bishop g4 move, which cannot be recommended because d takes e5. Also, quite bad for black to try the Philidor's counter gambit after f5, because white has quite strong alternatives. Bishop c4, which also were working last time. So today we will focus more on other continuations, especially knight bd7, so this Hannim's defense, as we call it. So when black is trying to stop white's attempts attacking the e5 pawns, indeed this knight e7 moves is having other problems. So despite the fact that black's is trying to maintain the center and planning to complete his development after bishop e7 or knight g to f6, and trying to keep the very solid pawn structure, white has very strong continuation, bishop c4. Pay attention. From now on, black has to defend very, very carefully. So because white has all his pieces actively posed and the bishop c4 threatens the f7 weakness. In the current position, which has occurred on numerous occasions, black has a few continuations. So first of all, black could play bishop e7. Also, instead of bishop e7, possible to play also knight f6. As well, black could try prevent white from knight g5 threat after h6. And finally, black can play in this position c6. So, bishop e7, knight f6, h6 and c6, and all the fourth continuation we are going to study today. First of all, bishop e7. This looks natural as black is preventing knight g5, but look what happened. After d takes e5, it's very important to take control over the d file. So black's position is very, very difficult already after this d takes e5 move. Why? Since after d takes e5, white has very typical, very standard move, queen d5, after which black just simply cannot prevent white from queen takes f7 check. Knight h6 only temporarily prevents white from queen takes f7, so white is just immediately removing the only defender of black's position. After bishop takes h6, white is keeping piece up without any compensation. It looks like after d takes e5, black has another continuation. Knight takes d5. Indeed, after knight takes e5 and d takes e5, here an unpleasant double attack is coming. So black is having weak pawns on f7 and e5. That is quite easy to find the move which at the same time attacking the both pawns. So queen h5. Black is going to lose material without any compensation. After g6, queen takes e5, white is simply pawn up. So in all this situation, it's quite important for us to understand that black in such a difficult position just after 5 moves. And these nice variations once more points on the importance of the control over the center. Because after d4, white is so great under controlling the most important center squares that black already after 5 moves getting into such a deep troubles. So let's try and to check what would happen in case of knight to f6. So now, of course, black is once again planning to play bishop e7 and then short castling, of course. So white once more trying d takes e5 move. Now what to do? Weak is d takes e5, because after knight g5, black just simply has no way to stop knight f7. And move like queen e7, losing instantly after bishop takes and knight e6, forcing black to give up just immediately. So, once again means that after d takes e5, black has no other options but to capture e5 with a knight. Knight takes e5. So what would you play as white now? Knight takes e5, d takes e5, and pay attention that at that moment black's king on e8 protects everything, also the hanging pawn on f7 and also the queen on d8. That tells us king is overloaded and white immediately explores this tactical nuance. How? Of course not by queen takes d8, because after king takes d8 bishop takes f7, white is only slightly better position after black is capturing back the pawn after knight takes e4. So it means that in that position white has much better continuation and standard combination. Bishop takes f7, check. White picked up the pawn with a check, converting his positional advantage into a material one. It looks like the bishop couldn't be taken due to the suspended queen on d8, but black can try king takes f7 move anyway. So what's the point? Looks like white won a queen, but black used his only chance. With the forthcoming discovery check, he threatens white's queen at once. Bishop b4 check. So the king is checked, the queen is hanging. Definitely in this position white has the only escape, giving up his queen for the bishop after queen d2. Bishop takes d2 and another precise move. Not bishop takes d2, not king takes d2, but knight takes d2. Important after this exchange also to protect our pawn on e4. So let's count the material. After the very, very sharp battle with attacks and counterattacks, with sacrifices and counter-sacrifices, we have reached the position where white has gained a pawn and black's pawn on e5 is isolated and weak. Definitely white has a clear advantage in all that line. So summary that knight g2 on f6 also doesn't solve all the black's problems. So once again we can see how powerful white's attack in the central variation of the Philidor's defense. So we just checked bishop e7 and also knight f6, and we cannot be so happy about outcomes in that lines. Once again I can like to show you that after knight f6 d takes e5, black cannot recapture the pawn on e4. Why? After knight takes e4, white simply plays queen d5, and this is extremely strong move. At the same time white is attacking the pawn on f7 and also knight on e4 is hanging. White is just winning some material. So, finally, let's consider the h6. It looks like a loss of tempo. Black is preventing any business with the incoming knight g5 threat, which was quite unpleasant after knight g to f6 and d takes e5, d takes e5, as we remember. So then bishop knight g5 was very, very difficult to stop. But also h6 move runs into serious problems. By the way, this move is also used to be analyzed by greatest third world champion Raul Capablanca in his well-known Chess Fundamentals book. But of course Jose Raul, as usual, never checked his analysis so carefully, and he didn't find the best opportunity for white, which I would like to present you. D takes e5. Obviously, black is losing a pawn after knight takes e5. Knight takes e5, d takes e5, and of course bishop takes f7. Too bad. Only chance for black is to capture d takes e5. The first glance, it's not so clear how to take advantage of this time-wasting move h6. But when we carefully look at the various tactical options, we can discover the weaknesses of the e8 h5 diagonal and also unprotected position of the queen on d8. So this queen on d8 protected by only king. So combining these nuances, white comes with a nice tactical shot. Can you find it? We were already working many times on this standard combination, and even in this position, this is quite useful to know that white has this tactical shot. Bishop takes f7. White is unexpectedly cracking open black's king side. King takes f7, only move. So now plunder of the combination. Knight takes e5. Check. Black is not allowed to capture the knight, do the hanging queen on d8. So there are no ways to back home after king e8. After queen h5, white is winning immediately. Once again, pay attention to the problem in black's position. So h6 move weakens too much the light squares near the king. So it means that black's king should go forward. King f6. And now white is to move. White has to switch to the knight c3. So from the check-in mood we are switches to the calm development. After this brilliant developing move, black cannot save the game anymore. So black must have accepted the sacrifice of the second piece, and his king gets only one-way ticket. King takes e5. So next line is quite forced. Look, black's king in the center of the board. It looks like it's quite easy to finish the game, but we have to be very precise here. Even the next line is pretty forced. White is going to draw black's king to the queen side. You have to remember all this variation quite good. Queen d5 check. King f6. Queen f5 check. All is forced. Black has to move his king to e7. Knight d5 check. All with the checks right now. So the knight comes very strongly into the play. Not for fun, we just played knight c3. Now, black has two options, or to move the king back to e8, or to continue the journey to d6. So what will happen after king e8? Unfortunately, this move loses immediately after queen g6 check, and this is a mate already. So it means that black has no answers but to go to d6. Now it's time for the bishop to get involved into the game. Black has to make his only moves all the time. Check on f4. So white is already attacking with the 3 pieces. The lone black's king. King c6. Queen e6. Check. And bishop d6. So for the first sign, on this critical position, we just ask how to continue white's attack. It looks like black solved all his problems and we are just 2 pieces down. Is it possible to do anything here? Yeah, it is. But once again, you have to be very, very precise in this position. Only knight b4 move wins the game. So only this nice move fills the fire into white's attack. So black's king now is being attacked briefly, but by the all white's forces. King b6, only answer. Bishop takes d6, getting rid of the last defender. C takes d6. Queen takes d6 check. King a5. White is still 2 pieces down, but the end is near. Sometime during your attack, after many checks, you could reach the moment when only piece improvement or building the maiden trap or maiden net for your opponent's king would let you finish your attack successfully. Otherwise, you lose the game. So there is no any more checks from white. So we have to play concrete. And the next move solves the task. At the current position, white has to regroup his forces and to occupy the rest of the squares around the black's king. Only move knight d5 solves the problem. So now black king is under a new threat. So white is intending also b4, also queen a3, also queen b4. The finish is quite near, but once again we have to find all the time the only moves. b6, trying to make a lift for the king. So that king could wear a6 to find the safe window on b7. At the same time, black is covering the 6th rank. So now b4 move is not getting into the decisive threat after king a6. Indeed, white plays simply c4, taking control over the b5 and intending queen a3 checkmate. King a6. Queen c6. Finally, the trap is closed. There are no escapes anymore. So white took control over the b7 square and black has no way to stop knight b4 and then queen b5 checkmate, or knight c7 and then queen b5 in checkmate. So after knight f6, knight b4 check, king a5 and queen b5, the game is over. There are no escapes anymore for black's king. So it's quite nice position, quite interesting situation, and quite powerful white's attack leads to the beautiful finish. Let's back to the current, to the start point of the combination. when white sacrificed the second piece after knight c3, and try to ask, is there any better move for black? So we can try now, instead of capturing the knight on e5, develop the bishop and maybe to pin this knight. Unfortunately, this bishop b4 idea is strongly met by queen d4. And black's king is in the mating net. After bishop takes c3, black has to exchange his bishop for the knight c3, which was ready to take part in the attack, of course. B takes c3. Once again, pay attention, black has no time for capturing the knight because the queen on d8 is hanging. So now we have to escape from this covering check and to play king e6. Queen d5 check. King f6. Queen f7 check. Black has to accept the knight finally, which allows white to develop the bishop with an important tempo, and the mate becomes inevitable. King takes e5. Bishop f4 check. King takes e4, all is forced, and after f3, checkmate. So, once again we prove that h6, wasting moves in the opening, can be punished very fast, already in the opening. So we covered the h6 line. So let's once again try to understand that in this position bishop e7 doesn't work, knight f6 doesn't solve all the problems, at h6 also leads to a very tough position, so black is in big trouble. And so with no better choice we have to conclude everything that for black is best continuation in this situation is just to play c6, showing no fear of the formidable bishop on c4. Black try calmly to complete the development, and his main idea to take control over the most important squares in the center. Let's say after knight g5, black has only answered, but enough, knight h6. Definitely white could play here for the tricks, or instead of playing knight g5 to play simply short castling, which also leads after bishop e7, knight c3, knight f6, a4, the position where white is having slightly better chances with more space. Indeed, if already we started our gambit course, it's quite nice to be familiar with the tactical tricks, typical tactical ideas in this position. So let's say after knight g5 and knight h6, white could be very good prepared for the move bishop e7. How? By move a4. First of all, it prevents black from playing b5. And in case of bishop e7, which is the most obvious, most natural move, unfortunately this is a wrong move and a bad mistake, after which black is getting into the losing position. Why? Because here is a very interesting tactical combination comes. Bishop takes f7, so white has to jump with his knight on e6. For that we have to get rid of the only pawn on f7. Knight takes f7. Knight e6. Wow. The queen is in trouble. So we have to move the queen out. Queen b6. But then a4, a5. Exactly that was the main point of our combination. After a4, a5, queen has no good square to escape. After queen b5 or queen a6, white just simply wins by knight c7, forking the king and the queen. Queen b4 check will be met by c3. And where to go with the queen? Once again, queen b5, knight c7. And after queen c4, for the second, it looks like black solved all his problems. Indeed. Knight c7 check. King d8, and no need to capture the rook. After which also white is having advantage, but simply play b2, b3. The queen is gone. The game is over. So, already here we see that black has to be extremely careful. Just to show you what could happen in the position after bishop c4, c6, and short castling. So let's say white is not playing this tricky move knight g5. Bishop e7, and after d takes e5, d takes e5, and queen e2. If black, after knight f6, rook d1, is playing the most natural way, queen c7, avoiding the threat knight takes e5, so black's next move looks like short castling with no any problem. But after knight g5, there is a serious problem for black. Short castling will be met by, once again, typical combination. Bishop takes f7, rook takes f7, and queen c4. The game is over. This funny line happened in the friendly game between Bobby Fischer and Ruben Fine in 1963. Indeed, it was already published in the Soviet Union Chess magazine in 1940. So all these new as well known old lines. So already here we can understand that it's not so simple to meet white's central attack in the Philidor's defense. So black has to be extremely careful. And when black is intending to keep his central pawns, position of his minor pieces remains very passive. So I have to remember it. In our next lesson, I would like just to bring you more examples and also some of my games which I played in the ICC simultaneous exhibitions against the ICC members using the central attack in the Philidor defense. Indeed, what is just important for you that central attack is very strong weapon against the Philidor defense, and playing actively, aggressively, that's exactly what I'm teaching you already for so many lessons of our Gambit guide. If you have any questions, just contact me on www.chesslessons.wordpress.com, where you can find also some of the scripts from my lectures. And thanks everyone for watching. We just meet in 1 week, and where I will present the third and last part of the central attack in the Philidor defense. See you and bye bye.